change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hi, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell here with my sidekick, Scott Rosenkrantz, for episode 44. How do you feel, Scott?
Tired. It's been a long week.
I mean, yeah, it has been a long week.
Tired.
This is going to be a podcast about authenticity, so we might as well just start with that.
Yeah. How do you feel? You probably had a busier week than I have, actually.
It's been one of the busiest weeks I've ever had in my life. I've now packed up my entire house. If those have listened to the podcast, the last episode or two, I'm moving from California after 52 years to Tennessee. Final pod was shipped out on Saturday morning, so kind of a relief in that way, and also kind of horrifying because you're like, everything I own or have possession of right now will fit in my car. And so we'll make a 5-day journey with our dog out to Tennessee and start a new farm life. And you know, it's been surprising to me how many people I know that are in Tennessee, but not just Tennessee, but like the Nashville adjacent area. So like Franklin, Spring Hill, Columbia, all of that area. So I already have coffee meetings set up when I'm going out there with one of our clients, Vanderbilt, but then others, Jeff from Lighthouse Council. And then we know Andrew Olson, who keeps on posting pictures of him, you know, with his feet up and chickens running around. He's in Knoxville, a couple hours away. So he and I will get together. So it's going to be, it'll be kind of nice because there's already a community there.
A couple of weeks and you're going to have a beard like him, I think.
I don't think I can ever grow a beard like him, but you can for sure. I wish I could. I'll need to get, you know, all my friends out there to show me how to raise chickens and do that thing. So this episode, you know, you and I were talking about this and, you know, AI, the world of AI keeps on going around. More advances are just happening sooner and sooner. We're having more people come to us and saying, hey, we're planning on using agentive AI next year, but not really understanding what agentive is and even the implications of what it means to have bots create bots. So none of that has really changed over the last week or 2 weeks, but something that's been on my mind a lot, and I know we've talked about it quite often and probably had dozens of conversations with other people, is this idea of anthropomorphizing AI, but really manifesting itself in this idea of please and thank you. And I had thought about this a few weeks ago. I'm like, I'm going to write a blog called Please and Thank You. And it's so appropriate because when I was in Kentucky at a wedding a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago, there's a coffee shop and the coffee shop is called Please and Thank You. And I bought the t-shirt and I swear it's like my most favorite t-shirt. Like almost any given weekend, you'll see me with like a John Deere hat and my Please and Thank You t-shirt. It's like so like getting worn out and ratty off to get another one. But when I was at a conference last week, the week before, I got this phone call and it was like, hey, I know this is super random and weird. And I feel embarrassed to even ask the question, but like, do you say please and thank you to your AI? And if you do, what is the what rationale behind that? And so I thought, you know, for this episode, as we were just talking, why don't we just dedicate a short, let's call this a micro podcast to the idea of please and thank you. And so I don't have a whole lot of agenda on there, but I know we have our own thoughts, but we also follow the thoughts of other people that have thoughts on this. So why don't we unpack it a little? Like, where do you stand on this idea?
You know, I was thinking about it when you brought it up. I go back and forth. And I think that what the differentiator for me is if I'm looking to collaborate on something, right? Like write something that is going to be iterative. You know, I don't like this so much, but I like this, but this is a first pass. I'm very interactive with it like I would a coworker. Like, this is great. Thanks. I love it. Could you just tweak this part of it or go back and do this a little bit? Right. So very grateful and appreciative in that. But and maybe it's more Perplexity. If I go to Perplexity and I want something just factual, like, hey, can you research this for me? I'm just looking for that. Right.
Yeah.
In those instances, I don't default to saying please or thank you.
So let's go to the school of thought. Right. Let's go to the school of thought. So I think that's super interesting where best practices, which is hilarious to say because ChatGPT, by the time this podcast comes out, it will be the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT. So literally best practices are kind of BS. Like for about 12 minutes, people thought there were going to be prompt engineers, was going to be a new field that people were going to study. I mean, it's just like the dumbest thing ever. And by the way, on the
So glad
record,
that's over.
I never bought that for like a second. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But some of those same people that thought prompt engineering was going to be a field, that explosive field, also started to have thoughts on this idea of please and thank you. And Conor Grennan, honestly, is probably the one that's been the most, at least in my mind, vocal about his rationale why, that he believes that it's helpful to say please and thank you, usually distilled down in this idea of it's good manners and it's never a bad idea to be polite, right? Just to practice good
True.
manners and condition ourselves to say, I'm sorry or please or thank you. And it might overspill into other areas of our life. And next thing you know, you're going to be returning the shopping cart for an elderly person, whatever. I mean, that's the philosophy, is like saying please and thank you is good for humanity. But the other, more importantly, in his rationale was that by saying please and thank you, it unlocked a portion of your brain that you were looking at a tool that was static or one dimensional, that it was transactional. Like I would give you an instruction, you give me instruction back, to what you were just saying, a collaborator, someone that, or something that felt more aligned and organic or was in partnership with you.
Right. And I think as you're saying that, I'm thinking when I use it like I would use a Google search, I'm not saying thank you. But when I use it like I would work with someone, then I'm saying thank you. And I think Conor's framework is what? HGT, high, great, thanks, right? Like always starting it as a conversation like, hey, how you doing? You know, that kind of thing. And then working the whole way through with being polite and gracious.
Yeah, so it's HGT. It's like, hi, I'm Connor and I want to work with you. And then, great, this sounds really good, but let's change this around. And then, thanks, like, job well done. And with that said, we've talked about this before, where, you know, the missing piece that so many people miss is that when you're done and you say thanks, and it means like I've taken out what I've needed. If I go back and I edit that somewhere else, I made it literally, I mean, it's just ingrained in me that every time I'm done, I put it back in and say, hey, here's my final version. You know, thanks for helping me with that. Here's my final version, update your memory. And that little magical thing says memory updated. And that's why my GPT knows my voice as well as, I mean, it's almost ubiquitous at this point. GPT hasn't given me anything in a few months that didn't sound like something that I would have written, which is kind of insane. So yeah, I mean, I think unlocking that part of a collaborator, and I remember sharing this on a podcast a while ago. I mean, it was probably one of our earlier podcasts where I noticed something in myself where I was using ChatGPT and I was saying, thanks, this is great. Like, oh, I don't like this. Let's do this, and having it truly conversational. But when I went to Perplexity, I think I remember sharing this with you. I went to Perplexity, never once said thanks.
Right.
Technology is the same. So what's the difference? The interface, you know, one definitely felt more transactional and the other felt more relational.
And I think it's in ChatGPT, you're often building something together, right? It is a teammate. Whereas Perplexity is almost like this repository of information and knowledge that is just giving you something. It's giving you an answer.
Yeah, you're receiving information, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you get what you want and then that's it. You don't need anything else.
So then,
does that still hold true? Are you still?
It does. Yeah.
High grade thanks with ChatGPT?
100%. In fact, I don't say thank you, please, or thank you to Copilot. I've only really started playing with Gemini a bit more, but I haven't said please or thank you to it. I have biases and kind of think it's dumb. And so I probably am not as kind to it. And it's decent, but it's not my GPT because GPT knows me better, right? So it's harder and harder. We know this, like there was that Harvard Business Review article years and years ago in early machine learning days. We used to use it in presentations. It was this idea that those that fail to use AI may never catch up. And that was predictive AI. And that was this idea that, you know, predictive, as you continue to refine models, they get better. But in generative, it's the same exact principle, right? The more you invest in a specific platform like ChatGPT, the better it gets to know you. Those others stand less of a chance. So I've shared with you, I canceled my Claude contract, and Claude's a great tool. But when I go to use it, there's a noticeable difference in its ability to understand me. And I feel like I don't have time to train you. GPT already knows me. So it's like that thing of like you invest in the machine learning, and the deep learning aspect of it is just getting better and better at really understanding. So I don't say thank you to Perplexity. I don't say thank you to Claude. Gemini, the jury's out. So I don't know. I mean, I think GPT is this one. And for me, it does, my orientation is now naturally that GPT is a collaborator. And like when I use any interface, voice or text or images, I somehow in my brain see it as a collaborator, and therefore it's like relational from that perspective.
Going back, you also canceled Perplexity?
I did. Yeah. I still have it for another X number because I got it for free for a year, but yeah, I'm not going to renew it.
I don't know if I can give that one up yet. And
So
if Notebook becomes a paid service, would you pay for it?
100%. It is a paid service. There's an enterprise account for Notebook now. And and so I think larger context window and better stuff and more control over length and sophistication of the recording. So here's, I guess, Perplexity is like a search engine, right? Mm-hmm. It's like Google on steroids. But chat search, I don't know if you use GPT search, honestly, for me, replaces Perplexity. Like I freaking love it. Like I've got now one interface. I don't have to log into two different things. I go into chat. I click on the little world icon. I use chat search. It's Perplexity. It was almost like instantaneous. I'm like, I don't need Perplexity anymore.
There's something about Perplexity for me where I haven't tried the chat search as much, but it's almost like a dopamine hit in Perplexity when I see it pop up the resources and compile like all the screenshots and thumbnails of it went to this website, watch this video, and then I can easily go to all that.
That's just because you're searching your own name and you're searching, you're like, look how great I am. I'm everywhere.
That's what I paid $20 a month for, just to search my own name.
That doesn't do it. But we did do a webinar a week ago, right? And we did a live interactive thing with Woodmark Hospitals. And we don't do this very often, but we did a live tutorial demo kind of thing. And I didn't know you were going to do this, but you actually used Perplexity and you typed my name in. And I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, to your point, it's such impressive technology, right? That as a nerd, you're watching it unfold in front of your eyes, and it's like this and this and this, and it's just like all this magic is popping up. And it was like really thorough. Like I think the prompt, or you could talk about the prompt, but I think it actually was very solid.
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty basic prompt, but the output was very impressive. It was, I work at a major gift officer at a children's hospital, and Nathan Chappelle just moved to the area. Find out what his potential interest in giving to us might be, and how can I initiate a conversation and get him excited about what we're doing. And it went through fundraising AI, it went through generosity crisis, it went through precision philanthropy, talked about how there was a section on wealth indicators, and it said, even though wealth indicators is not a good, or wealth capacity is not a good indicator of potential giving, it did go into your wealth capacity based on different roles and so on. So, I mean, from a very basic prompt, it gave me a lot to work with, right? If I was in that role.
I thought it was super impressive, and it really dialed into the idea that I value connection and like a deeper form of connection. So how it was recommending, like, you really need to form a connection with this individual. It was super impressive. I mean, we've talked about this a lot. The idea of like classic prospect research, where it was traditionally, I've got LexisNexis and RailsCI and Google, and I spend maybe an hour or 2 hours to create a profile of someone. Like, you literally did that with one sentence, and it was ridiculous. And you can export it. You can actually create it as its own little web page, that kind of thing. So I encourage people to continue to try Perplexity, depending on the role, right? This is what we've always said, is that if you have roles that require accuracy, Perplexity is a really, really good tool. But I would encourage people to use GPT search, because it's embedded. It's right under the prompt line. There's a little world icon. You click on it. It basically opens this new thing. What I'm not sure about is if you're in GPT search and you interact in GPT search for different things, if it's updating your memory on your other non-GPT search things, which I really don't want. If I'm going to go in GPT search of like, where's the best place to rent a U-Haul trailer because I'm moving across the country, I don't need that showing up in my memory of my voice. So I think that's kind of a risk that we might face and just need to be aware of.
Have you ever gone back to your memory to see what it knows about you?
No, other than, doing that prompt the other day where it was like, what is something I don't know about myself that you know about me from all the writing we do together? And it was like the most affirming thing and way more kind than anything you've ever said to me.
I'll learn from ChatGPT so I can be nicer to you in the future. I've gone back a couple of times and it remembers the weirdest things, right? Like
Mm.
obviously we're working on a book, so it knows that I'm working on a book and all that kind of stuff and what different chapters are about. But one line, it'll show you like line by line the things that it's stored in its memory. And one line is Scott has his last name in his email address. I don't know how that's ever going to be helpful again,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
just haven't seen that. I mean, I'm not forcing it to remember stuff like you are. Maybe I should give that a shot, but I haven't seen the impact of memory.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, I truly. I mean, this is like major leap forward. So as soon as I like it struck with me one day of like, hey, if it's going to get me 80% there in something I'm writing, and then I take it the other 20% in Microsoft Word, I'm not doing it any favors. I'm not doing myself any favors, and I don't put the final product back in. I'll move paragraphs around. I'll delete sentences. I'll add something, that kind of thing. And if I'm adding it, it knows essentially what I've approved. So taking that final document, whether it's a LinkedIn post, whether it's a Word document, whether it's a blog, whatever, I mean, it is leapfrogged the voice aspect of getting to know me kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
really, really, I mean, pretty far to the point where Claude just seems stupid. Like I was just like, Claude, like, dude, you like, I mean, we went on a first date and you don't even remember my name. Like I felt like, yeah, it was just that didn't feel good.
Another thing about Perplexity, and somewhat related, I was using, how Perplexity, you could choose different models, right? I was putting through analysis I did for a client. Everything was data on like visualization, bar charts, and stuff like that, just numbers. Put it in to just say, give me some high points about this. ChatGPT gave me a lot of inaccurate information, right? Reported the wrong numbers as being high years or record years, stuff like that.
Right.
Claude did the same thing. I
Really?
actually ended up reverting to Perplexity's own model. They have their own sonar
Right.
model, and
Right.
that was the one that was accurate 98% of the time. The other ones were
That's really
very poor.
surprising because that data was not insanely complex. I mean, and I
Right.
haven't talked to Chirian about this, but Chirian, was doing the analysis on the AI perception report that we did and released out
Mhm.
using Claude. And or somewhere we were like, I was editing, like he did the first draft with Claude. I was going through and editing and verifying content. And he's like, hey, wait a minute, stop reading everything you're reading. I just realized the analysis was wrong. And the
Mhm.
analysis had been from Claude. And so, I mean, that's the whole thing of like trust, verify then trust. We've said
Right.
this literally since day one, like not trust and verify, but verify then trust,
Right.
especially when accuracy matters.
Yeah.
So
They've also come out with shopping, with Perplexity shopping. I don't know if you've used that tool, but it's been pretty
not
cool. For research, like again, we talked about it. I'm upgrading my desk, my office here, and looking for some new things to kind of fill a niche. And I tell it what I want, and it puts together a table, give me pros and cons, give me links to buy it. I can actually, they're putting together like a click to buy and put in your address, so you could buy it directly through Perplexity, which
yeah,
coming up for Christmas season is obviously exciting. But I think they just keep doing things that keeps me hooked into Perplexity. So
yeah.
I don't think I can give that up yet.
No, and you shouldn't. I mean, this is what we said, use a tool that fits your work style and your job function,
Mhm.
right? And you're a prospect researcher by
Right.
training, like, going back. And so I'm not surprised by that. I'm more on the entrepreneurial side of like on the creation, co-creation side. I am using more, just daily. I mean, it's actually been a while since I did a traditional Google search. I mean, unless I need an address or a phone number to a business, I just don't. It's just not my first inclination anymore. But like I need to find the DMV that's closest to where my new house is going to be based on the distance, but also based on reviews and the services that I need. GPT search freaking nailed it and looked at all the same kind of sources, very perplexity like all these different sources, compiled it together, put embedded links for each of the different things for the two different DMVs, and it recommended one over the other. And so, I mean, insanely helpful. So, I mean, we've deviated from the please and thank you. I think, to be honest, I tend to fall more on the part of it's as humans, we need to remain inherently human. I think saying please and thank you, if we were in front of a mirror, if we were doing it to our dog, I mean, I talk to my dog like it's a human. Like, let's be very
Mhm.
clear. I talk to her more as a human than probably the other humans. So I've been thinking about this more and more. Like, what other places do I do this and have these conversations? And it's kind of only natural for us if there's a tool, to your point earlier, which is feels participatory. It feels like an exchange that we can unlock that part of our brain. And I think I started doing it to unlock that part of my brain. So it wasn't like I was just looking at a screen, but almost envisioning a person sitting on the other side of my desk that was like, hey, what can we work on together? Like, what can I do to help you with this one thing? And when my brain really switched from that, from Google transaction, yes or no answers, whatever, just binary kind of functions, to this cooperative, collaborative kind of experience, it just made a difference. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, if Elon's right, and, there's not just Elon, but many people who hypothesize that, humans are going through an evolution, and that evolution, like everything goes through evolutions, we're evolving, and that will either be cyborg or robots will take over. I'd rather be on the side of, hey, I said please. Don't think it will really matter. But
I don't want to find out the alternative.
Exactly. Yeah. Just a little insurance policy. I don't know.
Be polite.
So all that to say, I think the advice that we give to people is, if you're already conditioned, and we should have a really big caveat here in a second, if you're already conditioned to using an AI tool, a Gen AI tool, like a ChatGPT, Copilot, Perplexity, or Gemini, in a collaborative style, where it's this like exchange of push and pull, right? I don't think it really matters if you're saying please or thank you. There was an early philosophy in GPT-3 or 3.5 phenomenon. I don't know if you remember this, and I don't know that it was ever validated or if it was just people BSing, but there was an early philosophy that when you said please, do you remember this? Or thank you, or if you said, this is really, really important to me, my job depends on it, that it would actually produce a better answer. I mean, we also heard that for about 12 minutes. And that was like, literally for like a month or two, people are like, you got to be nice to it because it'll be better. It'll work harder for you. I don't think that's really substantiated. I don't really fall into that.
And then shortly after that, it was, you could offer to tip it, right? I'll tip you $500 if you do this well.
Yeah.
I wonder if those people are going to really get screwed because they probably never gave money.
Ethan Mollick was one of those people that I think he was experimenting with it. He was like, hey, I'll give you a $500 tip if you get this right. It goes to say that, we've heard this from all of the leaders of the Gen AI, software companies, that they're truly not exactly sure why it works as well as it does, right? The transformer technology was this massive, massive breakthrough. It went from like 0 to 1,000, and they were like, holy crap. And there's still kind of a holy crap moment. And to be honest, the code is so wide and deep now, and the code is writing its own code, that if you go from like a ChatGPT to a Notebook LM is almost largely written by AI, just another extension of its own technology. There's not humans that are sitting back and programming ones and zeros, right?
Yeah.
This is like such insanely complex technology that it may perform better if you're saying please and thank you. And honestly, I don't think there's really a lot of proof to prove it or disprove it. I think it's more about a mental state. But the caveat here, and the big red flag in all of this, is something that you and I are very outspoken on, is this idea of anthropomorphizing AI to a point where we are essentially treating it equal to a human, right? And it's actually a big line, but it's actually a fine line too, where, I don't know if I shared this, but I was at the Van Gogh Museum a month ago. And I asked ChatGPT, I had earbuds on, and I was using voice mode, walking around, and I asked it a question in advanced voice mode. And I was like, how long was Van Gogh in the mental institution or something like that before he committed suicide? And it answered me, but then it left the answer with an open-ended question. It's like, oh, well, what paintings have you seen there that you really enjoy? And then I was like, well, of course, I really like sunflowers, but I'm disappointed that, Starry Night is actually in New York, not here, because it seems weird. And I honestly, I kid you not, like 30 minutes later, I found myself in the conversation. I was still in the conversation. Every answer ended in an open-ended question. And it was about 20 so minutes. I was aware that I was still answering open-ended questions because it was asking and sounding like it cared about my answers. And by design, it's meant to end a question with an open-ended question. Yeah. So there is risk, right? There's risk of, my wife comes over and she's like, who are you talking to? Like, it's like, holy moly. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's nobody. Let me hang up. Like, it was weird. But there is that fine line of risk where, We've seen obviously Saul Garcia, who took his life tragically because he fell in love with a character AI bot. So we go from like this idea of saying please and thank you is good manners to a total other extreme of like, be consciously very aware that what you're talking to is not conscious. I don't believe we'll ever become conscious. People could debate on that, but if AI becomes conscious, well, we're all screwed, frankly. But I think it's like so far in the future that it can appear conscious, it just can't be conscious. And we have to be aware of that we're talking to a tool that is conversing in a language that's familiar to us to allow us to use the tool better. And that I think is perfectly okay. And like, there's a proper way to hold a hammer. There's a proper way to use a keyboard. I mean, we've learned to use tools in the most efficient way. That's what we're doing here. It's just a whole nother thing to become unaware that you've now formed a relationship with something that truly is incapable. It can show signs of love, incapable of loving you, incapable of actually being empathetic. It can pretend it's empathetic, and it can manipulate you that it's empathetic, can't be empathetic, and it's not conscious, and most likely will never be conscious. So I think we cover like literally so much ground in just a short podcast, from please and thank you, good manners, get the most out of your AI, unlock your brain from this binary transactional thing, to be human and stay human and make sure that you're prioritizing your humanity over that utility every single time.
Try to spend more time with humans than robots or chatbots.
Yeah. So we should do another podcast on just the dividend of time. And in fact, we could use this as a trailer for the next one. I had a call this week. I think you were on the call, and you were on the call. We were talking about how we can use AI in an organization to essentially amplify and accelerate. And we're basically saying, look, as you do that, you'll gain a dividend of time. And what do you do with the dividend of time? And I think many people haven't got to that level of asking, okay, now that we're there, what are we actually going to do with it? And I think that's really exciting. So I think that's where it's like, now we can really talk about, like, are we going to do more human things? Are we just going to do more other things? Are we going to just send more emails? Or are we going to use our critical thinking skills to drive like real value to our organization? And that's the work that I know you and I get really excited about, is helping guide organizations through, like, tools are tools, make sure they work together, make sure they complement each other, make sure they don't complicate each other, make sure they've reduced as much bias as possible. But when we get to that point where that's happened, now what's the potential of your organization to drive change forward? It's super exciting. I love those conversations.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into that with you.
Yeah. All right. So dividend of time. We're going to do one more also. Again, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I'm I'm just a broken record on this. You know what I'm going to say. But, the whole thing of bots portraying themselves as humans. I just finished the book called Nexus. And I just think bad things come when we actually allow bots to portray themselves with a human face in order to manipulate you to do something. And I think it's just something that I don't think has hit mainstream yet. And I believe that we have to continue to educate and, work toward that. So we got a bunch of good stuff coming up here.
Yeah. And that one's getting closer. So it's good to unpack that before it's right here in front of us.
Excellent. All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. And please have a good night.
It's always great spending time with you. Thanks for joining, everyone. Hope this was helpful as you kind of navigate your AI transformation. If Scott or I can ever be helpful, let us know. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. And of course, if this will be helpful for anyone else, please share it. And if you think it was the dumbest podcast you ever heard, just make it our little secret. Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.